How's it going, ladies and breezes? I'm Bobby Sixkilla. Welcome back to Sekimeiya. We're in the final chapter and it's time for us to fail some more questions utterly. Because in the last one, I'm pretty sure I failed every question I could possibly come across. Even the ones I was confident about, I still got wrong. But that's fine because it doesn't affect the story anyway, so let's carry on, shall we? Let's continue with our failure, but at least we'll get to the end. No matter what, we will get to the end. Even if I have to crawl there on my belly. With my teeth. Anyway, meanwhile in World C, everything happened similarly. However, when Katai attempted to unlock the storeroom door, he couldn't. Something prevented him from doing so. Like in World A, he heard Naomi's movements and chased her up, dropping the key in the same staircase. So what about World B? What happened to the security room key in that world? Oh man, what were we talking about again? What are we talking about again? I'm too busy reading out loud to know what I'm even taking in now. Everything happened similarly, however when Katai attempted to unlock the storeroom door he couldn't. Something prevented him from doing so. Katai didn't... That one? The truth is that Katai didn't drop it. How is that possible? Why did that differ between worlds? The answer is tied to something else that only occurred in B. Cool, Sudipo was in A, wasn't it? I can't distinguish which world is A, which world is B, and which world is C. I thought that the first run we did, Chapter 1, right, is A. But I'm not sure that's correct. The call with Sudipo happened in Chapter 1, on our first run. My guess is that's A. Handle's removal didn't happen in C, I believe? The alarm's effects are consistent across all of them, I'm pretty sure. If the first one was A, then I don't know. Let's try the call with Sudipo. It was a handle's removal. There, I knew I'd get it wrong. In World B, Katai went to the secret door, ready to leave. However, he immediately felt it with his hand. The handle wasn't there. He couldn't believe it. He'd been outsmarted. Speechless, he froze in place. Of course, as the keyhole had been in the handle, he couldn't even attempt to unlock the door. That is why he didn't notice that he dropped a rusty key in hallway A, and that is why Naomi didn't have the chance to take his suitcase. He understood that he would have to stay in the tower, but he didn't immediately give up. Shin Sekimeiya was still in the event room, and perhaps he could make use of it. Katai sighed deeply, trying to figure out who could have known about the storeroom's secret. Before anyone could see him, he went to the crystal room in hallway B. He had been told that refrigeration was essential to keep the Sekimeiya stable. He'd learned that Ashiya had two identical Sekimeiya by himself, but it wasn't public knowledge, hence, abusing Shin's plan still seemed feasible. He could keep a Sekimeiya for himself as long as Ashiya found Shin's fake in the cabinet. That was why he left each Sekimeiya inside in different cabinets in room B4. He came to the conclusion that was a good idea to just let the suitcase be found. As he disposed of it, he heard a sound coming from the crystal room he'd just been in. He ran there and saw one of the Sekimeiya on the floor. Atsuki and Shiroya had just world switched to World C. He couldn't comprehend it. The Sekimeiya was grey, but nobody was there. Nobody could have escaped after he'd heard the sound. Yet one of the cabinets was open. It was impossible anyone had been there, and the cabinet's temperature hadn't even cooled off yet. He hurriedly put the Sekimeiya back in, still trying to process what could have happened. When he left the room, he saw Ed and his group on the floor of the hallway. She was moving slightly, so Katai felt trapped. She didn't want her to wake up and see him leaving. Slowly, he walked over and crouched beside the three incapacitated people. So, doesn't this beg the same question? Why was the handle taken off in B? To begin with, who do you think was responsible for that? I have no idea. This guy. Oh my god! We get multiple versions of multiple people. I don't know. Doesn't matter. Yes, it was Arcano. Oh my god! What? I got that right? Out of 9 times 9's options? Then why'd I fucking think? Oh my god. He was the main person behind the attack. In this world, however, Shin were outsmarted. The alarm Shin didn't know about went off, and the Sekimeiya Arcano had hidden in the cleaning cart was taken. Who had been responsible? For a while, Arcano had no idea. However, eventually, he will switch to be with Isla. In that world, he was surprised to find out that the attic was locked, and even more so to see that everyone was taking shelter inside a bedroom. There, he learned about two things: Katai's presence in the tower and the existence of the storeroom secret. Naturally, he knew who Katai Kuiji was, but he shouldn't have been there. Akuto had suspected someone from Ashiya had hindered their plan, so he was internally taken aback when he heard the details about the world's events. Soon, that Akuto travelled to the past and appeared on the 24th of November. You remember what Shiroya thought, don't you? Out of nowhere, he appeared in a detention cell, but he was able to leave it. Then he realised he was in the far past. He recalled the times Katai had chosen to speak to Ito. He must have been who had interfered with Shin's plan. Katai hadn't been in the tower yet everyone had eventually claimed he'd been there since the start. It wasn't hard to suspect the truth. However, Akuto still couldn't believe what he'd done. In the tower, just desperate to fulfill Shin's plan, how had Shiroya come back to life? And she had clearly been aware of what he'd done. Why had she not said anything then? Akuto had no idea why she'd come back. Why she had come back. But he'd been next to her and Atsuki for hours. He'd seen how they turned out after he'd caused the death of their friend. At first, when he appeared in November, Akuto thought of what to do. He could take advantage of it. He knew what would happen. Yet his remorse soon overcame him. His greatest wish was to walk away, and he had the opportunity to do so. The plan was going to be a failure, but he was no longer in this world. Perhaps he could let his other self take the blame while he tried to atone for what he'd done. Of course, due to a certain perspective you viewed, you know that's not what happened. In any case, Akuto's actions heavily changed the start of World B's incident. Katai didn't know he'd dropped the rusty key, and Naomi didn't run to the attic with the suitcase. In Worlds A and C, however, the same thing occurred. In the attic, Naomi touched the Sekimeiya and world switched. When Naomi A touched it, she appeared in World B. Her keys remained in World A and the elevator was disabled. Until they had changed, she was trapped up there. From her point of view, both Sekimeiya disappeared, as she brought the suitcase along as one of her possessions. However, Naomi C's outcome was different. She world switched to A, and the range encompassed Shiroya as well. Even though the attic was locked, they weren't trapped. Not only did Shiroya have the key, but so did Naomi. Although she changed worlds, she grabbed the keys Naomi A had left behind, unaware that they were no longer hers. In addition, she brought the suitcase along too, but the Sekimeiya Naomi A had used were both still there. As both Naomi's world switched at the exact same time, for Naomi C, it seemed as though the Sekimeiya she touched turned grey, even though it was the one Naomi A had activated. Instinctively, what she did was touch the other Sekimeiya. Unable to believe her finger had changed a gem's colour, when she did, she travelled through time. Since one of the Sekimeiya was powered off, there was no world switch. Okay, I see. Although these beginning sequences evolved into drastically different days, some of the differences between worlds came from before the 15th. Isla's friend only existed in World B. In the other worlds, Isla hadn't been assured that everything would go smoothly. Nobody had told her she'd be able to touch the Sekimeiya, hence her mood was more dampened and Edna's was lighter. Sai sniffed out that something would occur on the day of the event, however, only in World B was he certain. He had read a forum thread that had foretold what would unfold in the tower. In that world, he was much more active from the start. In World A, Akuto couldn't have seen Katai as his enemy, so his attitude towards the others was rougher and sterner. In addition, the article of his escape from prison only existed in World B. In World C, Katai's Sekimeiya was taken by Naomi, so his priorities were very different. In World B, Katai had to step up to Edna's group, while in World C, he saw room A5 by himself before everyone else regained consciousness. Do you think there's a relation between all these changes? They had no real origin? That's the thing they keep talking about, right? Let's roll with that. No, they had an origin. The actual relation is that they were all caused by someone from another world. Up to the 24th of November, all the worlds were identical. You might be familiar with the many worlds interpretation. According to it, every choice splits the world, leading to infinite worlds, which are infinitely different. In these three worlds, the initial difference came in November of 2011, and it was caused due to someone who had world switched from another world. In other worlds, there was no change that wasn't influenced by another world. If 0 world switches had occurred, each of the 3 worlds would have remained identical. Only they caused reality to differ. It was the world switches that shaped this maze, a maze whose walls could be broken. There are numerous enigmas around the world switch. Perhaps you have some lingering questions. When Akuto A appeared in World B, the storeroom had been sealed by his future self. However, in part, that helped him go back in time to seal it. Doesn't that seem contradictory? If he had appeared in a world without a sealed storeroom, he would have been able to go back and seal it. You might find a number of similar cases. For that, you can look at the people who world switched and the way they shaped their new world. If the answer escapes you, that's where you'll find it, alongside the real form of the world switch. Okay. So what happens now? I couldn't just think that infinite worlds exist. After all, I might have been going back and forth between two. The first time Edna had brought us to a different world, but we had eventually returned. Then, when we travelled back to the morning, Shidoi and I had changed worlds, but we might have appeared in the same one again. And that was why thinking that infinite worlds existed was a bit of a leap. I looked at both Sekimeiya. If I touched one, would the world around me really change? What about the range, the replicated location, the time travelled, and all that nonsense? I walked to the kitchen. Can the refrigerator act like the cold cabinet? I opened it and put my hand inside. While it was cold, the temperature didn't seem as low as the Sekimeiya's cabinet. There was a regulation mechanism inside, so I changed it to the coldest point. I shut the Sekimeiya inside the refrigerator for a few seconds. When I took it out, I felt it through my shirt. It did work. It was pretty hot before and now it's not. So long as I keep the Sekimeiya in here, I might not be encompassed within two ranges. I wasn't confident the concept of range I was working with was correct though. I put both Sekimeiya inside to hopefully reset them. A few seconds later I took one out and set it on the countertop. Theoretically, it should begin to gather energy now, so I'll travel a short distance if I touch it soon. I counted up to a minute in my head, then I touched the Sekimeiya on the marble. What just happened? I was still in the kitchen, but I had teleported less than a step backward. The Sekimeiya's powered off just where I touched it. Does that mean that I travelled to the future? I must have only got a few seconds through time and there's no past self of mine here. The Sekimeiya was grey, indicating that I was at a point after my travel. Surprised, I realised I really had travelled forward in time. What was the difference? Why didn't I travel to the past? And the location where I appeared, why was it right next to where I touched the Sekimeiya? It's as if I only moved a tiny bit because I only went a few seconds to the future. I have an idea, but I don't think I can test it. Wait, no, maybe I can. As soon as I put the Sekimeiya in the refrigerator, it regained its white colour. However, I ignored that and ran to the staircase. It appeared the crystal floor was still empty, but I couldn't know for certain. Quietly, I walked to the security room. All the screens were still black, but they weren't my focus. I began to look everywhere I could. Sai said that he found the voice recorder here, but perhaps he hasn't yet. I might be able to be the one to find it in this world, and I did. Behind one of the monitors on the wall, I found the device that had been in Isla's purse. When I pressed the record button, a line appeared on the screen. Above it, numbers began to count the recorded seconds. There was no saved recording this time. That wasn't strange, after all, the recorder on Isla's purse had to have travelled from the future, while the one in the security room was the original one. However, my intention wasn't to record anything. I wanted to use the device as a timer that I could hold. Back in the attic, I stepped into the kitchen again. Both Sekimeiya were still in the refrigerator, but I didn't want to take one out yet. Instead, I powered on the oven and set it to finish after 10 minutes. Then, at the same time that the oven began to count down, I pressed the record button. Immediately, the seconds began to count up on the device's screen. With this setup, I know the amount of time I'm travelling. I held the recorder in my hands so that it would always be in my possession. When the oven's timer showed 9 minutes, the device had hit 1 minute. Meanwhile, I thought back to the many travels I'd experienced, wondering if there was any idea I could apply to every single one. When 3 minutes had been recorded, I took the Sekimeiya I'd last used out of the refrigerator and left it on the countertop. So, I started gaining energy after 3 minutes had gone by. I didn't stop staring at the ticking timer. A few seconds later, I brought my hand close to the Sekimeiya. I didn't touch it yet though. I had to make sure I did so at the appropriate time. Above the Sekimeiya, my hand patiently hovered. As soon as the recorder in the oven hit 5 minutes, I touched it. Once again, I'd hardly moved through space. I was still in the kitchen, staring at the Sekimeiya, however. It was grey, meaning that I was in the future. Immediately, I looked at the oven. Its timer indicated that 4 minutes and 15 seconds still remained. Right after that, I glanced at my own hand, eager to look at my timer. The device was there. Oh, I don't know. Minutes and seconds, is it? Excuse me. After 5 minutes, I looked at the oven and the timer indicated 4 minutes and 15 seconds still remained out of the 5 minutes. And And the time on this... The indicator... Wait, what? I stared at the energy after 3 minutes had gone by. I didn't stop staring at the ticking timer. A few seconds later I brought my hand close to the Sekimeiya. I didn't touch it yet though. I had to make sure that I did so at the appropriate time. Above the Sekimeiya, my hand patiently hovered. As soon as the recorder hit and the oven hit 5 minutes, I touched it. Once again, I hardly moved through space. I was still in the kitchen staring at the Sekimeiya. However, it was grey, meaning I was in the future. Immediately, the oven, its timer indicated that 4 minutes and 15 seconds still remained. Okay. But our timer went with us, right? So, nothing? 5 minutes? It's the same. Okay. It didn't travel with us then. But while the screens changed to 4 minutes 16, the oven's timer went to 4:14. Like before, the recorder kept counting, whereas the oven counted down. Huh. I touched the Sekimeiya at the 5 minute mark and went to 45 seconds into the future. That's a little odd. The Sekimeiya gathered energy for 2 minutes. The times it gathered energy for 15 minutes, we went 20 minutes through time. The most important thing though is that although I went 45 seconds to the future, the recorder seems to have gone 45 seconds backwards in time. That must mean that the replicated location was from 45 seconds before I touched the Sekimeiya. That left me thinking, but the train of thought was interrupted by the Sekimeiya. It turned white a few seconds after my reappearance. This is strange too. It took almost 2 minutes to power back on, but it's been about 5 minutes powered off when Sai and Shiroya disappeared from the event room. I had to do it again. I turned off the oven and erased the recording. Next, I set the oven to 5 minutes and pressed the device's recording button at the same time. I left the Sekimeiya in the refrigerator until 2 minutes had elapsed, and 30 seconds later, when the recorder displayed 2 minutes 30, I touched the gem again. The immediate result was the same. I appeared in the kitchen pretty much where I'd already been standing. I looked at both timers at once. The two of them showed 2 minutes 21, yet the device's timer kept ticking up, while the ovens counted down. What the fuck, again? I went 9 seconds to the future, but the location I appeared in was from 9 seconds before touching the Sekimeiya. Is this it? Was travelling to the future X amounts of time replicate the location and space you were at X amount of time in the past? What about travelling back though? I've gone to the future 3 times in a row. The only idea I had was to use the other Sekimeiya, so I put the one I've been using in the refrigerator. I set up the same conditions with the oven's timer at 5 minutes as I began new recording. That time, when 2 minutes had elapsed, I took the other Sekimeiya out, then 30 seconds later I activated it. What? The result was almost identical. I appeared in the kitchen very close to where I'd been. However, someone was in front of me. It was my past self. I remained completely still, just like the deer caught in the headlights. The back of my own head was in front of my eyes. But it didn't remain there for long. Quickly, my figure disappeared, revealing the powered-off Sekimeiya. I see. I just travelled through time, and the Sekimeiya's range was so small that it didn't pick me up again. It does seem like I went 9 seconds to the past. It's probably due to the Sekimeiya I used. This one makes you travel to the past, while the other seems to be the future. The oven's timer was at 2 minutes 25, so I hurried to look at the voice recorder as I thought about it. I'd gone 9 seconds to the past, so upon appearing, the oven's timer would have been at 2 minutes 39. Then I'd waited out 9 seconds needed for my past self to disappear. The 5 extra seconds had elapsed since. Before the oven's timer counted down to 2 minutes 24, I looked at the device between my hands. 2 minutes 35? Screen is blank, what the hell? Why? I can't know where this location is from. Travelling 9 seconds to the future put me where I'd been 9 seconds in the past. Wouldn't travelling to the past put me where I'd be 9 seconds in the future? And I'm still here, exactly where I appeared. But why is the screen... Wait, no. It might make sense. Let's say the Sekimeiya has touched at time t, in this case t is 2 minutes 30. X will refer to the travel time, which is 9 seconds. Let's assume that you're travelling x seconds to the past copies your state x seconds after touching the Sekimeiya. What would the time on the device be upon appearing? T plus x, or 2 minutes 39. The 2x seconds would pass to reach the future state. The timer would read t plus 3x, or 2 minutes 57, but that contradicts the past position. The timer at arrival would be t 3x. But nothing stops this from continuing. Another 2x seconds would be added. So it would just overload. The recorder's time would add up infinitely, and eventually its battery would run out. That can't make sense though. If the replicated location is one that occurs after touching the Sekimeiya, we would die. Just like with the recorder's timer, my age would have increased by a few seconds repeatedly, making me die instantly upon travelling to the past. If the device aged in a loop until it ran out of batteries, its appearance would have changed too. It would have appeared rusty, and it's hard to believe it wouldn't have disintegrated. However, this isn't what happened. To Sai's watch. Not only to Sai, but to a Sai who I have to assume travelled to the past. When I saw him, he should have been in the attic, so he'd come from the future. Later, I learned his watch had stopped working again. If he'd appeared 5 minutes in the past, where he would be 10 minutes after his appearance, the time of his watch would have increased by 10 minutes infinitely, and the battery would have eventually stopped working. There's no way it would have lasted thousands of years though, so what the hell? And why would the watch's inner mechanism add up the loop time until its outer appearance wasn't affected? While its outer appearance wasn't affected. The recorder isn't working anymore, so I can't keep testing. Wait, no, I can make it work again if what I've concluded is correct. After all, just minutes ago, I was holding it when it worked. I just have to replicate that location, which should be easy. I only have to travel a couple of minutes to the future. And that is what I did. I put the broken recorder in the drawer and travelled to the future. When I appeared, I was holding the device. The timer on the screen said 1 minute 35, as it was still working. This is definitely how travelling to the future works then. But what about travelling to the past? Did all those travels work like this as well? The first time I went to the past, I appeared in the lobby, right in front of the hallway A door. I later determined I'd gone about 20 minutes to the past. So 20 minutes after the point I touched the Sekimeiya. I was in the lobby, right in front of the hallway A door. I was watching the hallway, while the others looked through every room. Seriously? Is this what's been happening? Later, Shidoi and I travelled about 40 minutes to the past. I appeared in the security room, sitting down. However, the chair wasn't there to support me, so I fell to the floor. 40 minutes after the time we touched the Sekimeiya, I really was in the security room, looking at the computer. Sai had just run away from me, and I even looked at the time. I was there from 12:18 to 12:31. Even Shidoi, she said that she'd appeared in the second floor partitions, and when we reunited outside the security room, she'd just been searching for me through every floor, starting from the top. Both of us had just been in the locations we'd appeared. I could hardly believe it, but I finally knew the logic behind what had agonizingly eluded me, the replicated location. But hang on, does this mean that every time we touched the Sekimeiya and appeared in the location we recognized, we'd gone to the future? It's only travelling to the future that replicates the past coordinate you've been at. This is absurd though, it doesn't even make sense. Why the hell did I appear in the security room in the past? Because I was later in the security room? That's nonsense. Why the security room? If I'd appeared in the attic, for example, I would have been somewhere else 8 minutes later. I was only in the security room in the future because it's where I appeared in the past. Why the hell did I not appear on another continent? And then in the future, I would have been there, so I could have appeared there. It's absurd. What's actually determining where we appear? Something must be. We appeared inside the tower every single time. Shidoi and Atsuki had spent a long time in the elevator. Thanks to the stop button, they managed to escape from Sai. But Shidoi soon noticed something was happening to Atsuki. He looked pale and his breathing had sped up. Are you okay? Yeah, don't worry. Shidoi stared at her lap, worried about Atsuki's thoughts. Did he perhaps think that they would be able to leave? The silence went on for a long time. Eventually, Shidoi experienced some relief. Atsuki closed his eyes, and he didn't appear to be as stressed. Mirroring him, Shidoi closed her eyes too. Minutes later, both pairs of eyes shot open at the same time, and Shidoi couldn't believe what she saw. A knife was buried in Atsuki's chest. She looked directly into his eyes, but only silence filled the elevator. Neither of them could bring themselves to utter a word. Then Shidoi looked at the hand gripping the knife. She followed it up to an arm and then a shoulder. Finally, she traced it to Sai's face. But that sight didn't last long. Immediately after killing his first victim, Sai felt the urge to have a second. With a frantic motion, the knife sliced Shidoi's chest. Before she could even process the scene, Shidoi's body fell beside Atsuki, their body pulling together in the elevator. Their blood pulling together, sorry. Of course, you know this never occurred. If it had though, how would it have come to happen? Sai stared at both bodies momentarily. However, he didn't immediately understand that he was trapped. Atsuki had pressed the stop button, so Sai couldn't leave the elevator. He couldn't move either. Two bodies were on the floor. Eventually, when the replicated location took place, Sai was exactly where he'd appeared. But why? He was able to be there in the future because he'd appeared there in the past. Why had that been the location he'd appeared? Why not somewhere else? Maybe you have a good idea. I don't, I promise. I had no idea. It seemed to make no sense at all. But why the hell would this happen now if I travelled to the past? Let's say I travel 2 minutes back and appear in the kitchen. Will it be guaranteed that I'll be in the kitchen 4 minutes later? What if I don't want to? What if I decide to leave? Does the location where I appear force me to be somewhere in the future? That makes even less sense. I frowned, curious. What would actually happen? I'd never travelled with knowledge of how the replicated location worked, but it seemed like having that knowledge alone would break the rule. I would no longer replicate the location in the future through some weird unconscious fate. I mean, if I do appear in the kitchen, can I refuse to be there in the future? Can I risk doing that just out of curiosity? What if it's the universe's rule? When I end up not trying to go against it out of fear of what might happen? Which would conform the impossibility of being in a paradoxical location? That's pretty similar to not attempting to change the past in case it's just not possible, but it can't be fought, can it? And yet it doesn't make sense. Why would I purposely be somewhere just because that's where I appeared in the past? I wonder, can I maybe take advantage of it? It doesn't seem fair that figuring out how it works would be a detriment if I intended to travel back. Until now, the rule has been consistent through mere fate, but it wouldn't be the same if I was aware of it as it happened. A way to put knowledge into use, maybe as long as I have accurate knowledge. I put the Sekimeiya that had sent me to the past in the refrigerator. After I waited a bit, I took it back out. I set the timer and waited half a minute, then I brought my hand toward its glow. Alright, will you send me to the living room? Yes, that's where I appeared, in the middle of the room. And so I waited. I travelled 9 seconds to the past, so the only mandatory rule was that I had to be there after 18 seconds. But I didn't want to be there because the universe had forced me to. I did it so that my request could be fulfilled. 18 seconds later, I was still there. Before touching the Sekimeiya, I had thought of what would happen. I had thought that 18 seconds after appearing in the past, I'd be in the living room. Of course, if that was the case, it implied that I would appear in the living room, so it was what had happened. Then, to make it possible, I'd remained there, exactly where I imagined myself appearing. I see. So this is the opposite of useless. It's like the thought-up loops that I came up with. As long as the loop in my head before touching the Sekimeiya, and as long as it can be executed, it'll work. As long as it can be executed. Did I just travel from the 5th of January to the 15th of December? I went 21 days to the past, and my knowledge of the replicated location came after the travel, but before the location is replicated in the future. What the hell happens now? I appeared in the lobby. Does that confirm that I'll be alive in the future? Doesn't this travel genuinely force me to be in the lobby on the day? I went 21 days to the past. 21 days after January 5th is a Thursday, January 26th. There's something there. It wasn't some random day. Shiroi and I had talked with Miya about it. We'd said that we would go back to the tower on the 26th if we liked it the first time. Miya had died because of the Sekimeiya. Without the Sekimeiya's existence, the explosion wouldn't have occurred, and Miya would have kept on living. Ashiya held an event in that tower every Thursday, and on January the 26th, a Thursday, an event that had grabbed our attention would take place. If the Sekimeiya hadn't existed, we would have been in the tower on January 26th. Even after Miya's death, if no travels had taken place, it was feasible that Shiroi and I would have returned to continue healing and moving forward. But from what I understood, our reason for returning would be different, to satisfy a travel that had already happened. What was the exact truth hidden behind that? I didn't know, but it confirmed again that the locations where we appeared were in no way random. That means that I can pretty much teleport anywhere I want, doesn't it? I just have to think about where I'll be in the future. The limit is that the location has to be possible to reach in a set time. Is that it? I went to the kitchen and briefly put the past Sekimeiya in the refrigerator. Then, once it had stored energy for 30 seconds, I touched it. Once more, I appeared in the living room, where I'd wanted to appear. I looked at my hands, but they were empty. I see. I guess that was too nonsensical to work. Before touching the Sekimeiya, I thought that I'd been in the living room with the chocolate bar in my hands. Then I would appear there with the chocolate, and I'd be able to have it in the future so that it could appear in the past. Presumably that hadn't worked because I could never have obtained the chocolate in the span of those seconds, so I went back to the kitchen after I waited the proper amount of time. Once again, I touched the past Sekimeiya after it gathered energy for 30 seconds. After I appeared in the living room, I looked at my hands. I was holding a pen. Then I looked next to the television and saw the same pen. I see, this does work. Before touching the Sekimeiya, I thought that I would appear in the living room, and during those 18 seconds, I'd go grab the pen. That's why I appeared with it. However, I already had the pen. In other words, I didn't have to go get it. I could simply stay where I appeared so that I could appear with it. 18 seconds went by, and I didn't step away from where I'd appeared. So, even though I've never obtained the pen myself, I was able to appear with it solely because I could have obtained it. I effectively duplicated the pen. But I can't spawn objects that don't exist, or I can't feasibly obtain before the future coordinate, like the chocolate. And this only happened because I thought of my actions before touching the Sekimeiya. It was a fascinating concept and a ridiculously strong one. Simply by being aware of a single rule, the Sekimeiya had grown drastically more useful. If now I touch the past Sekimeiya while I'm holding the pen, I'll appear with it in the past. However, that's possible only as long as I have it in the proportional future. Meaning that when I touch the Sekimeiya, I either think that I'll let go of the pen before the time expires, or otherwise I wouldn't have it. I won't appear with it. I would be instantly fading the pen out of existence without having to actually get rid of it. Even though I should appear with it, I wouldn't. Alright, well, we need to wrap this one up here, because we're out of time for this episode, and we can fail on this question when we come back next time. Until then, hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you in the next one.